Today, we're going to be talking about The Delicate Art of Death by Ryan McGinnis. I received a copy of this book as an ARC or Advanced Reader copy, and it's set to release on March 1st. So I want to take a few minutes to go over the plot, but before I do, I want to warn you, there will be some spoilers in this, so if you're really sensitive about that sort of thing and you want to go into the book completely blind, make sure that you skip to the recap and I'll put timestamps down below. The story follows Stacy Martinez, who is a disgraced FBI agent. She and her partner Bill were looking into a company called the Citadel, and they kept digging, but their FBI, superiors told them to back off, and Stacy is kind of like a bulldog when she gets a hold of something. She doesn't really let things go. So she winds up digging into it well past when she was supposed to, and she gets fired from the FBI. The problem is, there actually was corruption within the Citadel. In a subsidiary of theirs called Axion, and Stacy and Bill were able to uncover all kinds of things where this evil corporation run by a guy named Devos was actually causing all kinds of problems. So the pair of them take this evil corporation Axion down, and Devos is dead, Stacy winds up with these horrible burns, and Bill retires out to Montana. So that's where the story actually opens. We actually start with Stacy in this burn unit getting this treatment that's being paid for by Citadel, which was the company that had Axios either as a subsidiary or as a competitor. So basically, in gratitude for her taking Axion down, they are covering her medical costs. They offered her a job, but she's a little leery about working with this company that she thinks is still kind of corrupt. So she says no to the job, but she does accept their medical treatments because she doesn't really have a choice. She can't afford it any other way. And I just want to say, all of this is explained a lot better in the book. I'm usually pretty good about taking notes as I read, but I got so into the story and so wrapped up so quickly that I kind of forgot to take notes, so, take that as you will. So after Stacy gets her burn treatment, she decides she needs to rest and recoup after all the craziness with the Citadel and Axion and Devos and all of that. So she decides to go and visit her sister Angela and her niece Olive in small town Kansas. And while she's on the road, we kind of get a little bit of an insight into her personality and the damage that all of this chaos has caused to her. There's a black car behind her on the highway, which isn't particularly unusual. And Stacy gets it in her head that someone's following her, so she panics and pulls off, and the guy just keeps driving past because, people are allowed to drive on highways. But we sort of get the impression that Stacy is paranoid and scarred internally from this ordeal that she's been through. So Stacy gets to middle of nowhere, Kansas, and we meet her sister Angela and her niece Olive. And I will say, Olive is kind of a weird character. Some of her mannerisms are that of a 6-year-old, and some of them are that of like a much older child, like a 10 to 12-year-old. So I'm not really sure what age Olive was meant to be. We just know that she's young, and that's about all we get. I should probably also mention, we don't know what any of these characters look like. There's no descriptions of Stacy or Angela or Olive, but that doesn't really detract from the story. You just kind of fill in the blanks as you go. Like, you have in your head or in your mind an image of what a disgraced FBI agent with the last name of Martinez would look like. Whatever that image is, that suits just fine. The story doesn't go into great detail describing these characters, and it doesn't need to. So once Stacy gets to Angela's, she goes up to her room, the guest room that she's staying in, and we see her stash a bag of cash. And we discover that she's actually stolen this money from the Citadel while she was investigating them. And although there is some risk that they will discover that she's stolen all of this money, she's not really that worried about it because in all the chaos of bringing Axion down, a lot of these sort of bags of cash that they had stashed all over the place were sort of lost in the shuffle. So Stacy helped herself to literally a duffel bag full of cash, and she sticks it in the vent in her bedroom. Which is sort of the author's way of helping us understand that although Stacy inherently wants to do the right thing, she's not above bending the rules to do it. So Stacy, Angela, and Olive are sitting at the dinner table, and Angela gets a phone call, and she's informed that her friend/coworker Jen has died. And that there's no indication of foul play, and there's no indication of trauma or illness, and the police seem to think it's all just natural causes, but Angela mentions that this is the second time this has happened in 3 years, that this is the second young woman who has died just mysteriously out of the blue for no apparent reason. And that sort of perks up Stacy's, hey, something's going on antenna. So Stacy's like, hey, that's a little weird. Do you want me to look into it? And Angela's like, no. We live in small town America. You're not even an FBI agent anymore. You're not an anything anymore. And oh, by the way, you're supposed to be here relaxing. Like, don't go digging into things that have nothing to do with you. Whatever it is, I'm sure the police here can handle it. So Angela makes Stacy promise that she's not going to poke her nose into things that don't concern her and that everything's probably fine and the police have it handled. So Stacy goes to a diner the next morning to kind of have breakfast and get herself settled in. And while she's there, this woman bumps into her and she turns around and the woman's kind of out of place, right? Like, she stands out. She's wearing bright colors. She's got horn-rimmed glasses. She's very like city fashion, very much not small town Kansas. And the woman's like, oh, hey, you're not local either, are you? And Stacy's like, well, no, I'm here visiting my family. And the gal's like, oh, okay, well, I'm here for work. It's nice to meet you. Us outsiders got to stick together. So the woman buys a latte and pays for Stacy's lunch as an apology for bumping into her, and off she goes. The problem is, Stacy's already got her antenna up. She's already thinking that there's something weird going on in this small town. And this woman that's like bumped into her and seems to be not from there and is over friendly, really, has kind of, got her fluff up. So Stacy tries to follow the woman out and she winds up running into somebody else and she can't follow her. So because she's already agitated about all this, and because she's had this thought of, okay, that's a really weird situation with these two women dying for no reason, in her head all night, she decides to go to the sheriff's office, despite the fact that she promised her sister that she wouldn't. And when she gets there, she meets Deputy Dipshit and is able to convince him by flashing her old FBI badge that he should let her see the file. And I should mention here that when you leave the FBI, whether it's voluntary or involuntary, they don't let you keep the badge, but it's just kind of one of those things that you sort of suspend your disbelief while you're reading the book because it works really well with the plot. There are a couple places where little things like this sort of stuck out, but they didn't bother me enough to interrupt my enjoyment of the story or to make me put the book down and go and look something up. And again, I want to mention, this is an ARC copy. It's an advanced reader copy. The book has not been published as of the recording of this review. So I have mentioned that to the author, so I don't know if maybe he'll put some explanation for why she still has this badge, or if we're just going to let it ride, because like I said, it doesn't really interrupt your enjoyment of the story. Okay, so Stacy gets the file from Deputy Dipshit, she starts looking through it, and there's nothing really in the report. There's nothing in the police report, there's nothing in the coroner report. The only thing that she sort of tweaks on is this little footnote that there was a mention of some wool fibers that were left on the body. Other than that, everything looks fine. The woman just died. So she gives the report back to the deputy. She winds up going to the library and trying to look up this other woman that her sister mentioned died. And she finds not one, but 2 or 3. Several women seem to have died over the past few years from mysterious circumstances, all attributed to natural causes. So although that's really weird for a small town in the middle of nowhere in Kansas with a really small population for women to just die for no apparent reason, Stacy's promised Angela that she's not going to poke around in this. Stacy's only there for a little while. She's just there to rest and recoup. And then when she's done, she's going to go off on another adventure. Meanwhile, Angela and Olive have to live there. And anyone from a small town can tell you, once you stir up trouble, people don't forget that. And Angela doesn't want Stacy causing problems for her and Olive. So she goes to a coffee shop to sort of mull over what she's discovered and think through what she's found and try to reason out whether or not she really does want to keep pursuing this. She gets the idea that there's something wrong and she really is struggling to let it go, but she also doesn't want to cause problems for her sister. But while she's there, like sitting in the coffee shop mulling things over, this Natalie woman shows up, the woman from the diner the day before, and she just sort of invites herself to sit down, and they're talking, and everything seems very casual, but Natalie's talking in a really weird way. She starts talking about things like dead-end jobs, and it really sucks the life out of you, and it's all this sort of heavy, death-influenced innuendo, which of course, raises Stacy's hackles. And then Stacy's like, yo, I gotta go, this is really weird, bye. And she rushes out to her car, and she turns around and she looks back through the window, and Natalie is gone. So that in and of itself is enough for Stacy to be like, okay, yeah, there's something funky going on. So she goes back to the sheriff's office and she asks Deputy Dipshit for the files on the other women that she found in the library. And sure enough, in all of those files, those little wolf fibers that were mentioned in Jen's death report are mentioned in all of them. And nobody seems to have cottoned on to this, so she mentions it to Deputy Dipshit. She's like, hey, there's a consistent thing through all of these reports. All of these women have died for no apparent reason. All of them are chalked up to natural causes. All of them have these wool fibers. And the deputy's like, oh yeah, but people have blankets or wool scarves or sweaters or whatever. And she's like, okay, that's great, but all of them also have bloodshot eyes. Isn't bloodshot eyes generally attributed to asphyxiation? And the deputy's like, listen, lady, I know who you are. After you were here the last time, it was such a weird experience. I looked you up. I know that you were disgraced and dismissed from the FBI for being a conspiracy nut. I'm not having it. Quit poking around. This has nothing to do with you. We've got this. So Stacy gets really upset and she goes and hides in her car and has a little crying fit, like you do. And I gotta say, I really appreciate the fact that the author didn't make her this solid, emotionless robot. Stacy's actually written like a woman, but she's not over emotional. She's tough, but she's not invulnerable. She still has emotion. She still reacts to things the way that you would expect someone to react to. And I just think that she was really well done, so I thought I'd mention that. So Stacy's in the car having a cry, and she's really starting to doubt herself. She's really taken a knock to her confidence, and being called out on hey, you're nobody, you don't belong here, quit digging into things that don't belong to you, this doesn't apply to you anymore. So she's really taken a knock to her confidence, and she's starting to sort of question, should I even be doing this? And then, that old dogged FBI determination sort of grabs hold of her, and she's like, no, there's definitely something here. I know something is wrong. So she decides to go and visit the mother or the parents of one of these dead girls. And she knocks on the door, the woman answers the door. She seems very open and eager to speak to someone about her daughter. Stacy lies and says that she's a sheriff's office intern. And she's just sort of going through some of the old files and making sure the procedure is followed. And the woman seems to buy that, at least at first. They talk for a while, they kind of hang out for a while, and then Stacy starts to ask some more probing questions. And the more she probes, the more agitated the woman gets. And eventually she gets really mad and she's like, hey, who are you again? Why are you asking all these questions? I've already given the police all of this information. Why are you here stirring up this again years later, 3 years after my daughter's death? Why are you really here? And Stacy's like, oh, I'm really sorry, I gotta go, bye. And the lady's like, hey, I was talking to you, where are you going? I'm gonna call the sheriff. So Stacy knows, oh crap, I'm in a lot of trouble. So after she gets back to her car, she sort of notices something in the rear view, and she looks again, and she waits, and she watches, and there's a guy following her. He pokes out around the corner and looks, and she thinks she sees the flash of a camera lens. So she bursts out of her car and chases him down an alley, and there's nobody there. There's nothing. And so she starts to think, did I really see that? Am I imagining things? Am I just being paranoid? Is any of this real? Or am I just making up a conspiracy where one doesn't exist because I'm so desperate to be right? So she gets back in the car and she's sort of deflated and she's sort of starting to question what she's doing and why she's doing it. And the phone rings. And it's Xavier, who is this assassin that she knows from her FBI days. She's worked with him a few times. Originally, she was trying to apprehend him, and then he winds up helping her and her partner, Bill. Anyway, so she's friends with this world-class assassin, and the guy's like, hey, trust your gut. It's all very Gibbsian. And he's like, hey, trust your gut. It's gotten you this far. Clearly you're onto something. You've always known when something's off. You need to go with this. So Stacy's confidence is bolstered and she's like, okay, I know that there's something wrong. I need to stop doubting myself. And she decides to go and see Jen's mother, who is the girl who just died. So when she gets there, she tells her like, hey, I'm Angela's sister. I was just here to offer my condolences. I noticed in the police report that there's a mention of some wool fibers. Can I look through your daughter's things? Does she have anything made of wool? And the mom's like, that's a weird question, but sure, of course you can. So Stacy goes through the girl's room, she kind of looks through her things, and there's no wool anything. There's no blankets, there's no scarves, there's no sweaters, no jackets, no nothing. Nothing this girl owns is made of wool, which is a little strange, but okay. So she's like, yo, this is really weird, and the mom's like, yeah, that is really weird. Hey, we're having the funeral tomorrow, why don't you come? And it's all very cordial, and the woman doesn't get upset, and Stacy leaves. And she gets back in her car, and she's like, feeling really guilty about doing all of this stuff behind her sister's back, because you'll remember she promised Angela she would leave this alone. So she gets back in the car, she's heading back home, she resolves that she's going to tell Angela what's going on and just come clean and be like, yo, this is what I found, it all looks really sus, but if you want me to leave it alone, I will. And on her way back home, she realizes she's being followed. And she winds up getting into this high-speed chase with this black car with black tinted windows through this small-town Kansas town. And eventually she loses the car, and as it's sort of speeding off into the distance, she snaps a picture of its license plate with her phone, but when she looks at the picture, the image is blurry. She can't actually read the license plate. She can see the car clear as day, but something is blocking the license plate from being photographed. And she realizes then that she's dealing with somebody who has access to really high tech. She's not being paranoid, she really is being followed. There's something really going on. So Stacy gets home and she's gonna talk to Angela, but before she can, Angela confronts her and she's like, hey, I ran into Jen's mom at the grocery store. Anything you want to tell me? You know? And so Stacy comes clean and she's like, look, this is what I've been doing. I know I said I wouldn't. I'm really sorry, but this is what I found. There's all of these girls that have died in the same way. All of them had bloodshot eyes. All of them had wool fibers on their bodies. None of this is explained and nobody's even looking into it. So her sister's pretty pissed that Stacy's been looking at all of this behind her back, but she's like, okay, yeah, all of that is pretty sus. You should keep looking into this. What did the coroner's report say? And Stacy's like, well, the coroner's been out of town. There isn't a coroner's report yet. So the next morning she goes to the coroner's office and she meets Travis Brown, aka Mr. Tall, Dark, and Handsome. But before she can get any information out of him, the sheriff sort of bursts in and is like, yo, can I talk to you for a bit? And he takes her outside and just gives her a hiding. He's like, look, you are impersonating an FBI officer. You are impersonating an agent of this sheriff's office. I could have you arrested right here, right now. You need to back off. I don't know what you're doing. And out of courtesy to your sister, I'm not going to put you in handcuffs, but you need to stop. And I'll mention this just as a consistency issue. At that point, the sheriff would have taken her FBI badge off of her because she's not really an FBI agent and she's not supposed to have it, but we just sort of suspend our disbelief in order to facilitate the story. So Stacy's really upset at having been called out on all of her nonsense, and she goes home, she's in tears, she's really agitated, and as she walks into the house, she realizes the door's unlocked, and she knows she locked it. When she gets up to her room, there's also some things out of order, things that aren't quite the way that she left them because, you know, she's been involved in all of this conspiracy stuff and she's an FBI agent. So she does things in a particular way so that she can tell if her stuff's been messed with just out of habit. And her stuff has been messed with. So she looks up at the vent where she hid that sack of money and it's not there. She turns, she looks out the window, and there across the street, sitting in the park, is Natalie and her bag of cash. So she rushes out and confronts Natalie and she's like, who are you? Why do you have my stuff? And Natalie's like, I know you, but you don't know me. I used to work for Devos at Axion and you ruined my life. I'm taking this cash. And oh, by the way, I'm gonna kill you. And Stacy's like, what are you gonna do? Shoot me in the middle of the park with all these witnesses? And Natalie says, well, no, not exactly. See, you're gonna meet me in this, park at the edge of town or whatever, this field at the edge of town. You're gonna meet me there at midnight tonight and we're gonna fight to the death. And then I'm gonna take this money. And if you don't show up, I'm gonna come in and I'm gonna kill your sister and your niece. And then I'm gonna kill you and take the cash. And it's all very, like, action movie excitement, you know, it's all very, like, super dramatic, but in a fun way that really works with the rest of the book. So Stacy's like, holy crap, I've brought all of my problems here into my sister's house, and now she and Olive are in danger. What am I gonna do? So she goes to a bar to sort of like drink away her worries, which is a weird move given that that doesn't seem to be part of her normal pattern, but whatever. She winds up in a bar, she puts back a couple of drinks, and these local guys sort of like hit on her, but in a really creepy sort of way. And just before Stacy gets into a fight, David Brown shows up and he's like, hey, gentlemen, how about you back off? Stacy, why don't we exit stage right? And so he's the knight in shining armor. He's come in and sort of saved the local guys from getting their ass kicked and saved Stacy from getting into a bar fight that would get her arrested by the sheriff that she's already pissed off. So once we're away from these creepy guys, Mr. Tall, Dark, and Handsome tells her, like, look, I heard the hiding that the sheriff gave you, and I know that you're really not supposed to be looking into any of this anymore, and if you don't want to, that's okay, but I just thought I'd mention, like, I think you're onto something. I think there is something tied together with all of these deaths. Can I bring these files by to show you tomorrow? Like, I'll get the report ready for Jen, and I'll bring all the files to you tomorrow. And Stacy's like, yeah, okay, that sounds good. First, she's got to take care of Natalie. So she goes to the sports field and Natalie's already waiting. And it all feels very like, meet me after school and we're going to fight sort of thing. And that sounds ridiculous, but it's really fun in the moment. So these women, like, get into a knife fight, and you gotta remember, like, Stacy's really badly burned. Like, her mobility is just not there, and Natalie's an assassin, so she's really good, and basically Natalie gets the upper hand, and just before she can slit Stacy's throat, a gunshot rings out, and Natalie crumples behind her. So Stacy spins around looking for whoever this is that just saved her, and another gunshot cracks, and she gets hit in the chest. Fortunately, she's wearing body armor, so she hits the ground because, of course, it hurts, and Natalie's not dead. It's gone through her shoulder, and they're like, holy crap, let's put our differences aside. Somebody's trying to kill us. So the women work together to sort of get themselves to some underbrush that's sort of at the side of the field, and the guy who's shooting at them comes looking for them, like they know he's going to. And they wind up working together to take him out, and, you know, Natalie's really injured, so Stacy gets her into the car, and they go to Natalie's hotel room. So Stacy goes to get some supplies, and when she comes back, there's a man in Natalie's room attacking her, and he's trying to kill her. Stacy knocks him out, and they wind up tying him up, and Natalie's like, hey, you've saved me twice now, let's call all of this water under the bridge. I don't want to kill you anymore. Look at this guy's phone. He works for Devos, and why Devos is trying to kill me, I don't know, but I'm damn sure gonna find out. So the women decide that instead of being enemies, they're gonna work together to try and take out this Devos guy who's now trying to kill them both. I should mention, Devos is supposed to be dead. Clearly he's not. This is set up for another story, and I'm really excited to read it. So Stacy gets Natalie patched up, and she leaves her with a wad of cash, basically like, hey, we're sort of frenemies, like, we're not buds, but we're at least on the same side for this. Call me and let me know what happens with Devos, and I'll call and keep you apprised if anything else happens. So in the end, Stacy does actually wind up finding out who the killer is, and I'm not going to spoil that for you. I think I've already given you enough information for you to know whether or not you're going to enjoy the book. But she does find out who the killer is, and she's vindicated in her sister's eyes, and it all has a very sort of happy ending feel, except on the last page, Stacy's phone rings, and it's a police officer from Montana, and he's like, hey, are you Stacy Martinez? And she's like, yeah. And he goes, your ex-partner Bill's house just blew up, and we can't find him. So Stacy jumps into her car and rushes off to Montana, and we fade to black. So that's what happens in The Delicate Art of Death. It is a fast-paced story. It's very snappily written. Like I said, the logic consistency is not flawless, but it's not... The things that are wrong in the story are not so wrong that they pull you out of it. And as long as you're able to sort of suspend your disbelief just a tiny bit, it doesn't interrupt your enjoyment of the story at all. I also want to mention how much I enjoyed Stacy Martinez as a character. A lot of the time you run into situations where male authors write female characters in really extreme sort of ways. They either super sexualize them, or they make them uncontrollable balls of emotion and they're completely unable to get anything done because they're so overridden by their emotion, or they go the opposite way and they turn them into robotic automatons. And Stacey Martinez is not like that. She does display emotion, but it doesn't stop her from doing what she needs to do. She is really tough, but she's also vulnerable. She's also got some weakness. She's also got some softness to her. And she felt very much like what I would expect from a female's perspective of an ex-disgraced FBI agent. All of her reactions felt very real and very appropriate, and I just think that Stacey was really well written. Overall, I really enjoyed the book. It was a snappy little read. I poured through it in a few hours on a Saturday afternoon. And like I said, I read it so fast and was so into it, I completely forgot to take notes. So if I missed some of the details or some of the things seemed jumbled, please put that on me. That's not a fault with the book. I was just so excited about it that I didn't take notes, and then I had to go back and do everything from memory, real quick this morning before I started filming. So if there's anything jumbled or mixed up or doesn't make sense, that's on me, not on the author. So yeah, that was my experience with The Delicate Art of Death, and if you're looking to pick it up, it releases on March 1st. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button, and of course if you like the way that I present information, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell down below. You can find all of my social media contacts in the description, and of course if you want to keep up with me and the progress I'm making on my current novel, you can do that at effywritesbooks.com. Thank you so much for watching, have an excellent day, and I'll see you next time.